A panel investigating the U.S. Capitol insurrection says that former President Donald Trump tried to force then Vice President Mike Pence to reverse Trump's 2020 election defeat. The congressional probe also found that Mr. Trump put Mr. Pence in danger as the Vice President tried to certify President Joe Biden's victory. Rioters on Capitol Hill who were calling for Mr. Pence's hanging were just meters away from him as he sought shelter from the mob. And today marks 50 years since an earlier assault on U.S. democracy that did lead to the resignation of a U.S. president. The Watergate Scandal made headlines the world over when it was revealed that Richard Nixon had ordered wiretapping and other illegal actions against his political opponents. We have a special guest, former Watergate prosecutor Nick Akerman. Mr. Akerman is a former assistant U.S. attorney, and he helped prosecute Watergate back in the 70s. A very warm welcome, sir, to today. Good to have you with us. Now, Watergate counts as the epitome of political scandals, but when you watch the January 6th hearings and compare them, was the U.S. in much greater danger on January 6th?
Yeah, I think it was, because really what President Trump was trying to do was essentially disrupt the transfer of power that normally takes place after an election. He was basically trying to ignore all of the votes that Joe Biden got and tried to put himself in power for a second term. Richard Nixon obviously did things. Both presidents believed they were above the law. President Nixon, I believe, ordered the break-in at the Watergate. He orchestrated the cover-up of the Watergate scandal. But Trump did, things that were even more egregious in terms of going to the heart of our system and the peaceful transfer of power that every president has undergone since the Republic was founded.
Now, President Nixon was disgraced and the Republicans made him go. The danger for U.S. democracy passed. President Trump is still very much a force to be reckoned with.
No question about it. And what's even worse and more dangerous is that there are people who are buying into this big lie that President Trump won the election. And some of these people are actually going to be on the ballot this November to be in charge of elections in various states. So, yes, this is a danger that has not passed. They're trying to do exactly what they did the last time, but this time they're trying to put their own people in charge of the elections in key states in order that they can throw the election to Donald Trump if he should lose a second time. So, yes, this is a continuing danger.
What lessons can be learned from what you did as a Watergate prosecutor that could be of use today for the January 6th hearing?
Well, I think, look, it's the same problem that was just alluded to before, and that is just how fragile our democracy is here in the United States. A lot of people look at Watergate and say, well, this shows that the system worked and that Nixon ultimately left. But we came very, very close to Nixon basically firing the entire Watergate investigation. Archibald Cox was fired on the Saturday night, known as the Saturday Night Massacre. But for the fact that the public rose up in absolute disgust and forced Nixon to appoint another special prosecutor who kept us in place and kept the investigation going, this may never have gone forward. So, yeah, one of the lessons I think that we have to learn from here is how do we improve the system and what do we learn from what's happened? For example, in Watergate, after Watergate, one of the reforms was to institute a protection system for whistleblowers. And that turned out to be a very important factor in terms of the public learning about President Trump trying to get President Zelensky of Ukraine to initiate an investigation into Trump's chief rival, Joe Biden. But for that whistleblower statute, it's very unlikely that the person who did come forward would have come forward, and very unlikely that we would have learned about it. So part of what we have to do in each of these scandals is try and figure out how do we make it so that the system actually does work and will work in the future. certainly with Watergate, no one ever believed that this would happen again. And here we are with Donald Trump.
Yes. How does Vice President Mike Pence come out of this?
I think he comes out of it as a real hero. He stood up to Donald Trump. He refused to go along with this crazy idea that he could decide who would win the electoral vote, or that he would send the vote back to the states so that the state legislatures could come up with a new slate of electors. I mean, he basically stood up to Donald Trump and withstood a lot of pressure. And I think everybody has to give a lot of credit to Mike Pence for doing the right thing and having the courage to do that.
I'd like us to briefly discuss the role of Virginia Thomas and her husband, conservative Supreme Court Judge Clarence Thomas. The January 6th committee want to question her, and he voted against the release of crucial documents. Is the Supreme Court compromised as well?
Oh, there's no question. I mean, it wasn't as though she was just exercising her freedom of speech and a right to say what she wanted to say. She was actively involved trying to get legislators in Arizona to overturn the election and come up with a separate set of electors. She was pushing the chief of staff for Donald Trump to do the same. She was much more involved in this. And I don't think we know the full extent of that yet. But it certainly doesn't look good just because Clarence Thomas, Supreme Court Justice, her husband, wound up being the only vote against directing Donald Trump to turn over all of his presidential papers and finding that he did not have a valid executive privilege over those papers. So, yeah, there's some real concerns about, the Supreme Court right now, and in particular, Ginny Thomas's husband. I mean, it just does not look good.
A very final thought, very briefly, is democracy at stake in America?
It definitely is. This has not been decided. Donald Trump is still around. He is still perpetrating the big lie that he won the election. There are lots of other people running for election this time around that are also perpetrating that big lie and looking to undercut the democracy and undercut our electoral process.
Former Watergate prosecutor Nick Akerman. Sir, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for having me.